There is a moment when grief and betrayal collide so hard that you can no longer tell which one hurts more. Mine arrived at my grandmother's funeral, while my older brother stood before friends and relatives accepting praise for his endless devotion. "My grandmother never spent a penny on me," he said with a heavy sigh. "I took care of her because family comes first." People nodded with admiration. Some even wiped away tears. I stayed silent. At the time, I believed every word. 8 days later, I walked into a community bank and learned that my brother had quietly transferred more than $90,000 from Grandma's accounts into his own. The last payment had been processed 3 days after we buried her. That was the moment I realized the funeral speech had been rehearsed long before Grandma took her final breath. My name is Elena Brooks. I was 34 years old and worked as a hospice social worker in Raleigh, North Carolina. Every day, I helped families navigate the painful final chapter of life. I understood elder abuse, financial exploitation, and controlling behavior, yet somehow, I completely missed it inside my own family. My grandmother, Margaret Brooks, raised my brother Ryan and me after our parents' messy divorce consumed their attention. She attended every school play, packed every lunch, and somehow made her little brick home feel safer than anywhere else in the world. She had worked as a librarian for nearly 4 decades. Grandma believed everything important belonged on paper: receipts, utility bills, prescriptions, birthdays. Nothing escaped the neat handwriting inside the worn red ledger she kept on the kitchen table. She often smiled and repeated the same lesson. When someone doesn't want things written down, that's exactly when you should start writing. Ryan was 6 years older than me. As children, he protected me. He repaired my bicycle, scared away bullies, and never let me walk home alone after dark. Those memories made it impossible to imagine he could ever become someone I needed protection from. Life hadn't treated Ryan kindly. His marriage ended in divorce. His contracting jobs came and went. Credit card debt piled up, child support fell behind, and every financial crisis somehow became someone else's responsibility. Grandma always rescued him. Not with huge gifts, but enough money to keep disaster from catching him. Then she suffered a mild stroke. Although she recovered, Parkinson's symptoms and memory problems slowly took away her independence. She needed help with meals, appointments, medication, and daily routines. Ryan immediately volunteered to move into her house. "We're not putting Grandma into assisted living," he insisted. "She deserves family." Everyone praised his sacrifice. I did too. None of us realized that the greatest danger to Grandma wasn't a stranger. It was the person who had just convinced us he was her hero. Ryan settled into Grandma Margaret's home as though he had been preparing for it his entire life. During the first few months, no one questioned his intentions. He drove her to doctor's appointments, organized her medications, repaired broken cabinets, and cooked dinner every evening. Whenever I visited after work, he looked exhausted but determined. "You don't need to worry," he always told me. "I've got everything under control." I believed him, so did the rest of the family. What Ryan never mentioned was that Grandma was already receiving professional home care assistance 3 mornings each week. A licensed caregiver named Lydia Carter helped with bathing, laundry, physical therapy exercises, and medication checks. Grandma paid the agency herself. Still, Ryan continued telling relatives he had sacrificed his career to become her full-time caregiver without accepting a single dollar. The story earned him endless sympathy. Gradually, he became the gatekeeper to Grandma's entire life. He answered her phone because her hands trembled. He collected her mail because she struggled to open envelopes. He handled her online banking because, according to him, scammers targeted elderly people every day. One afternoon, I called to speak with Grandma. "She's sleeping," Ryan answered quickly. "I'll call later." "No need. I'll tell her you called." She never returned the call. At first, I blamed her illness. Looking back, I realized she was slowly being isolated. Grandma eventually signed a limited financial power of attorney, allowing Ryan to pay household bills and manage routine expenses if she became unable to do so herself. Their attorney, Nathan Koldersk, explained every restriction carefully. "This document allows you to pay your mother's expenses," he said firmly. "It does not allow gifts to yourself or personal compensation unless there is a written agreement." Ryan laughed confidently. "I'm family," he replied. "I'm not charging Grandma anything." Everyone relaxed. Months passed. Ryan suddenly seemed financially comfortable. He replaced expensive tools, repaired his pickup truck, and stopped complaining about debt collectors. Whenever I asked how he could afford everything after leaving work, he smiled. "I've been managing." 3 weeks before Grandma passed away, I found her sitting quietly on the back porch with a cup of tea. She looked unusually nervous. After making sure Ryan was inside the house, she leaned toward me. "Elena," she whispered, "Ryan gets upset whenever I ask about my bank account." I stared at her. "Do you think something's wrong?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But my savings disappear faster than I remember spending them." I offered to review every statement together. Grandma nodded slowly. "Not while he's home." We agreed to meet with Attorney Nathan the following week, 2 days before our planned meeting. Grandma Margaret was rushed to the hospital with severe pneumonia. She never returned home. Ryan stayed beside her bed, speaking softly to nurses and accepting grateful smiles from everyone who walked into the room. He looked like the devoted grandson everyone believed him to be. When Grandma quietly slipped away, our family was devastated. At the funeral, Ryan stood before relatives with tears in his eyes. "I'd do it all again," he said. "She never paid me a dime. Looking after her was an honor." The room filled with sympathy. Several cousins hugged him. Even our Aunt Diane praised his sacrifice. I wanted to believe every word. Then Attorney Nathan Cole quietly pulled me aside after the service. "Margaret named you executor of her estate several years ago," he explained. "You'll need to gather every financial record before probate begins." Ryan overheard us. His expression changed instantly. "Why her?" he asked sharply. "Because that's what your grandmother wanted," Nathan replied calmly. Ryan forced a smile. But I noticed the tension in his jaw. Before leaving, I asked him for Grandma's house keys, bank paperwork, and financial files. He frowned. "We buried her today," he snapped. "You're already worried about money?" "I'm only doing what Grandma asked me to do." He shook his head dramatically. "Everyone can see what this is." Several relatives looked toward us. Ryan raised his voice just enough for them to hear. "I spent 2 years caring for Grandma for free, and now I'm being treated like a criminal." I refused to argue at the funeral. 8 days later, after completing the legal paperwork, I visited Piedmont Community Bank with Grandma's death certificate and executor documents. The branch manager, Sandra Mitchell, had known Grandma for years. She welcomed me warmly before opening the account records. Everything changed within seconds. Sandra suddenly stopped scrolling. Her face became unusually serious. "Was Ryan ever officially employed as your grandmother's caregiver?" she asked. "No." "Did they sign any written agreement allowing him to pay himself?" "Never." She slowly turned the computer monitor toward me. The transaction history filled the screen. Over 16 months, dozens of electronic transfers had moved from Grandma's checking account directly into Ryan's personal account. The total exceeded $91,000. My heart pounded. Then Sandra opened the final transaction, 8,600 memo. Final caregiver balance. The transfer date froze my blood. It had been processed 3 days after Grandma's funeral. I stared at the screen, convinced there had to be some mistake. "There has to be an explanation," I whispered. Sandra quietly checked the login records. "There is one," she replied. "Your brother used his online power of attorney access." She looked directly at me. "But legally, his authority ended the moment your grandmother passed away." Sandra immediately froze the account and submitted the final $8,600 transfer for review. Before I left the bank, she printed every transaction made under Ryan's authority and advised me not to confront him until the estate attorney had examined everything. Attorney Nathan Cole wasted no time. Over the next 2 weeks, we gathered every receipt, invoice, and bank statement connected to Grandma Margaret's finances. The evidence painted a very different story than the one Ryan had told at the funeral. Grandma had continued paying her own utility bills, property taxes, groceries, prescriptions, and professional home care agency. That meant Ryan's monthly caregiver reimbursements weren't replacing those expenses at all. When Lydia Carter, the home care nurse, reviewed the records, she confirmed she had cared for Grandma 3 mornings every week for nearly a year. "Ryan often left the house while I was there," she explained. "He definitely wasn't providing 24-hour care." Nathan then asked Ryan to provide receipts supporting every payment he had taken. He managed to document only $10, $800 in legitimate expenses. The remaining $80,200 had no written authorization. Then came Grandma's red ledger. Inside, one entry immediately caught my attention. Ryan asked to be paid every month. I told him Nathan said we needed a written agreement first. 2 weeks later, another note appeared. No papers were ever signed. Nathan searched his office calendar. Sure enough, Ryan had once scheduled an appointment to create a caregiver compensation agreement. He canceled it the very morning it was supposed to happen. There had never been a contract. At the probate meeting, Ryan arrived expecting another family argument. Instead, Nathan calmly laid every document across the conference table: the bank records, the receipts, the power of attorney, Grandma's handwritten ledger. Ryan insisted Grandma had verbally approved everything. Nathan slid the final transaction toward him. 8,600 tells, he said quietly. Transferred 3 days after her funeral. Ryan stared at the paper without speaking. You had no legal authority after Margaret passed away. For the first time, he had no explanation. Rather than face a lengthy court battle, Ryan signed a settlement agreement. The unsupported transfers would be deducted from his inheritance. Every house key and financial record would be surrendered immediately, and the estate would recover every dollar the law allowed. The bank successfully reversed the final transfer, and Ryan's inheritance was reduced by the amount he could not justify. When he handed over Grandma's keys weeks later, he refused to meet my eyes. "You got what you wanted," he muttered. I shook my head. "No, I simply honored what Grandma wanted." Months later, as I placed Grandma's red ledger on my bookshelf, I understood the lesson she had spent a lifetime teaching me. Money can disappear. People can lie, memories can fade. But honest records tell the truth, long after voices have fallen silent.